Come, let us fix our eyes on Jesus. This is Unpopular Theology, episode 31. Today we're going to be talking about creation, as we're calling this episode our Roommate Creation Invasion. This is the first interview we're ever doing on Unpopular Theology, and I'm really excited about it. So before we get started, go ahead and hit the like button, go ahead and subscribe, go over to our Facebook page, like us over there, post new content there every Tuesday through Friday. And with that being started, we're just going to dive in without announcements. So, like I said, this is the first interview we're ever doing on Unpopular Theology. And my guest here is Jake Moede. He is a Pre-Sem student here at Concordia University, Wisconsin. He's a languages major with a minor in philosophy, right?
Yes.
And has led a Bible study on creation. So he is a Pre-Sem student just like me. So we're still both amateurs,
Yes.
technically.
But we've done our research.
Particularly Jake. So, Jake, welcome to Unpopular Theology.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. So, what would you say is the typical argument for evolution?
Easily, I would say the crutch for evolutionists is fossils and their interpretation. And usually when they bring up fossils, creationists shy away. Common Christian just believes them and says, oh, science says I better just back off. But that is not true. Fossils are imprints, and it's how you interpret them. It was explained to me that fossils are evidence. They're evidence for either creation or evolution. It's just how you interpret it that changes its meaning and what it means for our beliefs. So for evolutionists, they use especially carbon dating, but all their dating methods and how they interpret the fossils and other parts of the universe, all the different rocks, space rocks and things, they use their dating methods to explain how old the Earth is. And they say, well, evolution needs billions of years to happen, so they interpret the evidence to fit that criteria for them, so that millions and billions of years fit. But that's not how science ought to be done. They are starting from a bias. And of course, creationists can do this at times too, but the best way to do it is to start scientifically, factually. So from a factual standpoint, you need to look at the fossils and interpret them with only the facts and not making so many assumptions. So fossils, the way fossils are created is they're buried, and the hardest parts of the fossil, shells or bones, as you know, are the things that get fossilized. And what a fossil is, a lot of people think they're just bones that are preserved, but they're not. They are imprints. So a rock is made around it, then the bone disintegrates, decays, and is replaced by other sediment, different minerals that crystallize into that formation. So it's like a mold put around the bones fade away, and then a cast is made. So the fossils we have aren't actually bone. In most instances, we have actually found evidence of some hard and soft tissue, even blood cells in fossils, which is something that definitely points toward a young Earth and not millions of years, because blood does not last that long. But anyway, then these fossils, we discover these imprints in the fossils, and it's how you interpret them. Now, if you just look at the fossil, of course it would take an unbelievably long time for fossils to be formed, and millions of years would honestly be required. But what evolutionists like to overlook is any historical events that could have happened that are not observable. So it's important to distinguish between historical and observational science. Now, observational science is the fossils that we have. The interpretations that we make off of those fossils, that is historical science. And we can't prove historical science because it's not observable. Evolutionists say that evolution is proven, but that is historical science. They're saying what happened in the past, and they can't say that because they didn't see it, they didn't witness it themselves. Although they will tell you, you can see it in the fossils, you can see things happening, but that's not how it works. It's single moments in time. It's not entire processes happening.
All right. That answered quite a bit of that was a nice answer there.
I could have kept going on.
So you did mention carbon dating. For those who are watching this and don't quite know what it is, could you give a brief explanation? Because I know it is a bit of a clunky topic that
Yes.
takes a while to explain. So what is it? What are its benefits? What are its flaws?
Well, carbon dating, I can explain in layman's terms because I myself don't know scientifically that much about it, but carbon dating is dating carbon atoms in fossils and artifacts. This is how we date not only fossils but also archaeological artifacts, and it can help us tell what time periods things came from in history. And it's actually very inaccurate at times. You will be told that it's becoming more and more accurate, but a lot of assumptions are made, and when you make assumptions as your foundation and you keep making more, it just builds up and you get further and further from the truth. So what carbon dating does is it's dating the carbon atoms of decayed matter, because I'm not entirely sure of all the scientific details, but I know it can be refuted. It can be accurate at times. The more recently something went extinct, or not extinct, was fossilized or preserved in stone, the more accurate it can be. Like a lot of archaeological artifacts, carbon dating for those can be fairly accurate. But when it comes to fossils, it's too long ago. For creationists, anywhere from 4,000 to 10,000 years ago, or to evolutionists, where they say it's millions of years ago. That's a long time. I mean, carbon dating, you can't be that specific within millions of years. But when you base off of assumptions, it's not accurate. It's not a very good basis for evolution or fossil interpretation.
All right. So, what would you say is the best argument for creation that's out there right now?
Well, now, I'd say the best evidence for creation is actually the flood. Now, the Bible is accepted as a true historical document, and if you accept the account of the flood, the Great Flood, which covered the entire earth over 40 days and 40 nights, did do enough damage and cause enough of a catastrophic event that it allows for the fossilization of as many creatures as we see in a short period of time. See, this is something that evolutionists don't account for, whether they're Christian or not. They assume that processes continue the same way they are throughout history and things don't change. But from a creationist point of view, not only do we believe that the earth was created in an already old form, like God would have created a tree already grown, even though it is just born that day, and a rock or a canyon to look like it was carved by a river, even though that's just how we made it. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
We were talking about the most compelling argument for creation.
Thank you. Sorry, scatterbrained. So, with the flood, what the flood does is it accounts for these supposed millions of years in a matter of only days. And that may seem impossible, but if you do your own research and look at research that's been done by creationist scientists, they will prove to you that a catastrophic flood does do enough damage, and it does a good job at preserving these fossils. The way a fossil is made is it's buried, but it has to be buried quickly. It has to be buried quickly, because if it's not, like, you'll know, even evolutionists will tell you, this is how this fossil came. Like this dinosaur got caught in a landslide, so it was covered up very quickly, and it has to have a lot of layers on top of it, otherwise the bacteria and bugs will eat away at it and the whole thing will decay. Even the bones. People think bones are indestructible. They're not. It's extremely rare for a fossil to be formed. It was a friend explained to me, if you are walking on the beach and you leave a footprint, does that footprint stay? No. As soon as you leave, waves wash it away or the wind blows it away. That footprint would have had been made very strongly, firmly, and then it would have to be covered up really quickly. There are some examples of footprint fossils, but they are also extremely rare. And what the flood does is it accounts for this rapid burial of creatures, and it would have covered them with so many layers, too many layers for any insects or anything to survive to be down there and eat away this material. Obviously, they would eat away the flesh, and that would decay. But it allows for it's a better chance for fossils to be formed. And we find large deposits of especially aquatic creatures in the fossils. A majority of the fossil record is made of aquatic, marine creatures, whether they're small or large, and which also points toward a large flood that covered the entire Earth.
All right. So then there's always the question of, so how do we as Christians speak the truth in love to someone who is not a Christian, or maybe is a Christian but they believe in evolution? What's your response to that?
The approach I would take is to not necessarily come from a biblical standpoint, not at first. Not if you're talking about creation versus evolution, because you're both starting with your own bias, and it's just going to cause division and infighting between you. So if you want a civil argument, I would say to stick to the science, the facts, not what either of you considers science to be. Science is knowledge, it's facts, it's not interpretations. So you need to look at the facts together, and if you look at both of your arguments, if the world was created over billions of years, or if it was created just in a matter of days by God, try to look at both point of views and say, okay, if the world was created as quickly as a creationist says, wouldn't that make sense with this model? Because then it would seem, or even carbon dating would say that they're old, even though God created them that way. And you can come from both standpoints, and it can be more of a civil discourse. And that way you can, there's less fighting. It's more of a philosophical argument. You're looking at the science.
Says the philosophy minor. All right, last question here. What resources are out there for Christians like myself, your average layman? What are the resources out there for creation?
Well, one of my favorite resources is Answers in Genesis. They have a very extensive website with many resources on there. Not just their resources, but outside sources that they draw from and they point you toward. And they also have many book series that are very helpful. And they go through a lot of the scientific data that is beyond me right now, that I'd have to look back on. And they explain these things much more in depth. They give evidence, they give proof. They go over evolutionary beliefs and arguments, and they refute them. They say how you can be apologetic toward your faith, and how you don't have to separate Christianity from science. There are many Christian scientists they'll point out, like Francis Bacon or Isaac Newton, who actually based his theories off of his beliefs in creation, and that's how he found out that, well, laws of nature like gravity, it's because of his beliefs. Dr. Raymond he created the MRI. He is a creation. I don't remember if he's alive, but he is a creationist. And Christianity, your beliefs in Christianity does not affect science. So that's another thing they like to point out. There's other creationist websites. I think creation.org or .com or something as simple as that. There's websites out there and many book series. A lot of Christian, Lutheran specifically, pastors will know a lot about creation and how it does fit with the modern world and science today. But no, I think Answers in Genesis is a very good bet. It's a good place to go. They are also in connection with the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter.
All right, so that's a lot of information. Hopefully you processed it all. Jake Moede is a Pre-Sem student here at CUW. He's a languages major, minor in philosophy, and he led a Bible study on creation, meaning he did a lot more research than I did on the topic. Jake, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
All right. Next week, we're going to continue our series on this when we'll have Josh Horst on the show, and he's going to talk about why it matters. And Josh is just raising his fist right now. So until next week, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus.